Greetings, it is I, Tantus Narban Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire. Welcome. Today is continuing our discussion on Advanced Dungeons & Dragons AD&D. I've finished up talking about what information you can find in the Player's Handbook. Today I'm going to talk about what's in the Monster Manual. Now I'm just going to talk about one of the main Monster Manuals that I use and I own, but there are a lot of Monster Manuals out there, and this will apply to any of the Monster Manuals or the Monster compilations that they did release from 2nd edition, because they did release monster compilations for the different world settings they had. So this book here, this main one that I used and use still, it had a compilation of creatures from, of course, Greyhawk Adventures, since that's the main setting of 2nd edition, but also had Forgotten Realms, Dark Sun, and Spelljammer. So it had creatures from all of these world settings. Let's just dive into looking at the statistics of a monster and what all these mean. The first thing it mentions is going to be climate and terrain of that monster. It's going to tell you the area which you're going to find the monster. After you look at climate and terrain, it's going to tell you frequency. In the actual entry, it will show you that it's going to say it's either very rare, rare, uncommon, and common. This tells you how frequency you're going to encounter this monster in this terrain. These are associated with percentages of finding them, which it tells you in the front of the book here. Next, it lists the society. It'll tell you if you meet this creature more as an individual or in some kind of group, and what kind of group it would have. Now, solitary doesn't necessarily mean you're going to find it alone. It's just that you'd find it in small groups at most. Now, it'll also tell you the activity. This tells you whether it's a creature that you'll find more during the day, or if it's going to be active during the night. It'll tell you the diet. It'll say carnivore, it eats meats. Herbivore, it eats plants. Or omnivore, it eats both. Or if it has some kind of special diet, it will list it in the entry telling you what kind of special diet it is if it doesn't fit under the same category. It will also list scavenger if it's scavenger and goes after carrion. That's one I almost forgot to mention there. Next, the book will list intelligence. It's going to give a sort of number and what that would mean. There's a chart in the front of the book here also, which kind of defines what it would fit in under intelligence. 9 or 10 would be more human average. Anything else would be different from that. It will list the treasure types. These are letters. This is something you're not going to understand a lot right now because I haven't talked about the DMG yet. I haven't talked about the Dungeon Master's Guide. In the Dungeon Master's Guide, it will associate these treasure types by letter with what kind of treasure it is. So it will actually give you this information. So I will talk about that later, but you just have to know you have to reference the DMG. Now we'll also tell you the alignment of the creature. Now this is typical. There are exceptions to this rule. So if it says like this creature is chaotic evil, you could find a lawful good version of that creature. It would be an exception to the rule and kind of rare, but you could find one. Now it will list the number that will typically appear when you're encountering them. This basically tells you if when you're encountering one of them, regardless of how their society is built, you normally encounter one in a battle. Or you normally encounter like 2 to 4 in a battle. It will mention how many is typical. It's going to mention the AC. This is its armor class. Now the armor class could include if it's wearing something like armor, if it's more like a humanoid, or it could include miscellaneous modifiers that you don't really see, like if it's got tough armor as scales. Like a dragon has scales, it doesn't wear armor. It's got a very low AC because of that. Now it's also going to mention movements. It's going to tell you the movement rates. Now it will list by abbreviation a number of special movements. In the front here, of course, it tells you what these abbreviations mean. The only one that's unique that I should really mention is flying, because flying also has a rating in it from A to E. A being the best type of flying you can do, E being the worst. And effectively, if you are A, you are a really good flyer, you are pretty much expert, you're effectively like floating in the air, while if you're E, you're like barely keeping afloat really clumsily. Next up is going to be hit dice. All monsters have a hit dice of a D8, so that's what you know ahead of time. It will list if there's any kind of bonuses to the hit points other than just the hit dice here. Like if it's got +3 to its hit points other than its normal hit dice. After that, it will list its THAC0. This works exactly like the THAC0 of a player, to hit armor class of 0. It's the number that this monster has to roll to hit armor class of 0. This is dependent on its number of hit dice. So all the creatures have very similar THAC0 depending on how many hit dice they have. Next, it's going to tell you the number of attacks it gets. This is the typical number of attacks the creature gets. This isn't including special attacks or anything like that. And also with the THAC0, if there's any special bonuses to attack, it's not including those. This is just the base number that it has to roll. So if it's using something like a magic weapon, that would give a bonus, or has some other kind of bonus, that's not mentioning it for THAC0. Next is going to list its attacks and damages. This will tell you what its traditional attacks are usually the same amount. It just said it was, so it's got the number of attacks. It'll tell you how much each of these attacks does in damage, and any kind of bonuses it would to that damage, like if it's got strength bonus or anything such like that. So it'll briefly kind of let you know what kind of attacks with this. If it has some kind of weapon it can use, it will list that separately, and it will use those weapons instead of its normal attacks, which it very well could. Next up, it will list any special attacks it has. This could be something like a dragon's breath weapon. It will also list special defenses. It's similar to the special attacks, only it's defensive abilities rather than offensive. And after that, it lists magical resistance. It gives the percentage of magical resistance, which I talked about in an earlier episode. So this, if a monster has it itself, it lists it here. Now it's going to mention its size. This is from tiny to gargantuan. It will let you know its base size. This also tells you in the book what that size really means and how much of a range of dimensions that creature would have. It will also list morale in this book and tells you how likely it is to fight to the death or to run away at the site of injury. The book lists how much XP you gain for killing an individual of this species. Next up, we go away from the statistics sort of section where we had the entry on the monster, because we just talked about that, to the basic description. It gives a little bit of an appearance, and then it talks about combat. This is effectively the strategy these creatures tend to use, or the organizations when it comes to combat, the kind of tactics it will use. You look to there to figure out what the creature will do. Habitat and society sort of gives you an idea of what its normal actions would be, either in a group or just in normal life. And of course, ecology will tell you where it fits into the world and how it fits into the world. Now, it does talk about psionics here, just in case the creature you're talking about is psionic. I'm not going to go into details about it. Second edition psionics is a very complex. It was one of the more complex systems. If I talk about psionics, it'll be in a separate video. But know this gives some of the basics of what a psionic creature would have and details about how they work. So that's it for today. I talked about the monster manual. I let you know how you look through the entry and understand what kind of information it's giving. I kind of like some of the entries here, and over the years of seeing different editions of monster manuals, all of them have had different combinations of things that they've shown us that I've enjoyed seeing. This one, for example, the descriptions with the combat, habitat, society, ecology, this is my favorite description section. Very few of them seem to mimic this kind of detail on fitting the monster into the world anymore, but I mean, the entries are just, it's a second edition monster. I kind of prefer the newer editions when it comes to fighting things anyway, so, but you know, if you're using the system, it works in it. So, if you have any questions, comments, anything you want to say, please leave it in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. It shows your support for the Empire and the work I do. And until the next time, I bid you farewell.